All right, everybody. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Operations here at Route Consultant. And if you're not familiar with Route Consultant at all, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and Linehaul. And today we're really here for a couple of reasons. One, we want to help new buyers looking to get into the space for the first time, really to get a sense of what they're walking into and help you helpfully make that right decision into the space if it's the right fit for you or not. And then for everybody who's already in the space, who's trying to figure out the crazy world of FedEx each and every day, every week, we want to make this a place where we can come together, talk about the new things happening, and make sure that everybody knows and that we can ask questions and find the best way forward together. So for our regular attendees, welcome back. We're always happy to have you, and we always do want this to be a place where we can always come together, learn, ask questions, feel comfortable asking questions about anything, and we're happy to answer them. Now, before I go too much farther, I do have a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So, Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So, if you've never been to one of these, or whether you're watching live or on YouTube later, this is format-wise. We're going to go over some content. We're going to go over some new things that we see that are happening in the industry, then some new listings and events that are coming up. And then after that, it's going to be a pure Q&A. So if you have questions about anything that we talk about today or anything about the industry as a whole, Alex and I will be here to answer that. Just make sure that if you do have those questions, to use the Q&A button at the bottom. You can just type those questions in at any time. We will get to those at the end of the webinar today. The chat, if you put it in there, I'm going to miss it. It won't go through to me. The chat's more of where we're going to put and send information to you as we're talking today. So Q&A if you have those questions, and we will get to those at the end. So for today, it's that time again in Linehaul, where if you're a current contractor, you've got a chunk of points after peak season, and you got to figure out what to do with them. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that strategy today and where to be thinking about growth, the right places to put it. There's also some important things to be thinking about around audits, and it's this time of year around documentation to really start to refresh some of your strategy there. And of course, we've got Alex on here to talk us through it all. So Alex, why don't you say hello and we will jump into it.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And so I think the big thing around audits was I-9s and some things that you were
Yeah.
seeing to think through.
So there's two emails this came out from FedEx. One was with the annual compliance, which is going to begin March 3rd. That's the annual compliance where we have to certify that we are a organization in good standing with our state. We file our taxes on time. You give your accountant's information. You certify that all your employees are W-2 employees and none of them are 1099 contractors. And that you have a license to operate in all the states that you actually operate in, and that you pay unemployment insurance in those states. So make sure that you go into your profile on MGBA and make sure that all the information is correct there. And then go ahead and do the certification. Now, the email does not come from FedEx. It comes from a third-party auditor that they utilize. This is to prevent a conflict of interest because we are providing them with non-public information, and so FedEx wants to kind of ring fence it and make sure that it's not getting given the information is not being given to FedEx, but is actually being conducted by an auditor. So be on the lookout for that email. I believe the company's name is Blue Umbrella, and the email address is coming from is not Blue Umbrella. So just make sure you keep checking your spam folders. If you really want, I can actually look up the email address, but I don't have it off the top of my head. More importantly, I-9s. Okay, so we have a new president. He is going through and deporting a lot of people. One of our requirements as FedEx contractors is that we agree as part of the TSPA and for P&D guys as part of the ISPA that we are going to only employ authorized personnel to work in the United States, and that we are going to conduct an I-9 verification of every single employee before they begin work. Technically, you can do it within 3 days of them starting work, but that has to be completed. Now, why is this important? Because there are certain processes and procedures that you need to take in order to maintain records. A couple things. You need to keep a copy of all their Schedule A, and then if you happen to use Schedule B and Schedule C documents, their Schedule B and C documents. And you need to keep a copy of their I-9 form. Now, you can do it in different formats. You can do it electronically, or you can do it in paper. Either way, the information has to be segregated. It cannot be commingled. And what does that mean? It means that the information, you cannot take like Josh's information and my information and Joe Schmo's information and just put it in a folder and say, this is my I-9 folder. No, every single individual has to have their own folder. Hence why I've decided to go the electronic format, and I think I pay $50 a month to a third-party vendor who does all my I-9 verification and provides that certification and that process to maintain all those records for me. Um, any employee that you currently have working for you must have an I-9 form. If you've destroyed it or failed to hire it, or didn't think that you needed one because you were hiring, you know, Josh from Alex Room and now he's working for Joe Schmo and he's already been a FedEx driver for years and he already has his FedEx ID. No, technically every single time a driver switches companies, contractors need to redo an I-9 verification. So there is a process in E-Verify or with your third-party vendor that you're using to go recertify or to catch up if you have an error. But you need to have this because the fines and penalties, if you get requested to do an audit by I think it's the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, USCIS, yes, are pretty hefty. I think it's $10,000 per fault identified. So, just to scare you enough. Okay, so here's the process, okay? So, make sure that you have an I-9 document. And you have their Schedule A and Schedule B resources. Either have them printed out and put them into a folder and then have one for each employee, or use a third-party vendor. I've used EMP Trust. I know ADP and Paychex both have vendors that they utilize. There are a lot of them out there that you can do this. Don't count on E-Verify to be your source. The federal government says that E-Verify could not be your document retention source. Um, if you need to maintain a document for every single one of your current employees, and then you need to maintain a document or a record of any employee who's worked for you within 1 year of their termination date. So if Josh worked for me up to December 21st, and then I need to maintain his I-9 records until December 22nd, 2025. I know that's a lot to take. It's really important. I don't know why FedEx would send out that email or that message to contractors without them getting the impression that, they're going to conduct audits or they've been notified by USCIS that there is a there is a reason for them to come and start knocking on contractors' doors. Now, the way that they will do this is it's not going to be an ICE raid where they come, with agents and, depose you. What they're more than likely going to do is either communicate to you by email or communicate to you by snail mail. Um, and you will have 3 days to gather your material and present it to an ICE agent who will come to your place of work. So if you work out of your house, they will come to your house and they will do an inspection of your records. Or if you're using a third-party vendor like EMP Trust, you will authorize EMP Trust to furnish all the material required to the ICE agent.
Now, let's say somebody's buying a business. Do
Mhm.
they need to do new I-9s for all of their employees, or do they get the previous ones?
Um, Technically, it's a gray area. I would suggest redoing all the I-9s. And just so you know, I've bought businesses in the past. I typically have tried to do I-9s, and I did an audit when this email came out and realized that two employees of mine who've been working with me for over 5 years, I don't have their I-9 records because they came from a previous company, and I need to go through and do a process. There is a way to do it. Do not try to backdate it. That is falsifying federal records, and that is another criminal um, penalty. What you should do is clearly state the actual date the employment began in the certification point um, portion of Section 2 of the I-9 form. And then you need to attach a signed and dated explanation of the corrective action and what caused the failure for you to maintain these records.
Yeah. So I would, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say these audits don't happen very often. But some of the things, the messaging that we're seeing from FedEx in light of also recent, some of the things the president's done has just made it where we want to remind everyone about this and say, hey, we don't know that there's like a sweeping audit coming, but it would be in your best interest to double check.
Yes, I have no idea. I just know that the president has been out in front. I mean, I think Linehaul probably has, or TSPs probably have less risk than ISPs in this situation because to be a TSP, or to be a driver or employee of a TSP, in general, you need to have a CDL, a commercial driver's license, and to go I think in most states to get a commercial driver's license, you have to provide proof of either citizenship or a green card. I don't know. I don't know every state though, and there are some blue states out there that might have, very loosey-goosey driver's license requirements. I just don't know. I mean, each state is different. I'm just saying, you know what? This is a time where you want to be CYA. Go through, conduct your audit, make sure that you have the material segregated and not commingled. If you don't have the information, go out and get your driver to redo the I-9, date it today. Make sure you clarify that the employment started at a back date, whenever that did, and then attach a written letter saying, hey, we did not have the I-9 form. This is the corrective action taken. This is the reason why we did not have the I-9 form. Please contact, so and so if you have any questions. And
Yeah.
then sign it. Make sure you wet signature it.
And we're talking about drivers, but I would assume this would also apply to any of your employees, your admins, your
Yes.
office that
Yes.
could be at a higher risk. Yeah.
Yeah, so this requires, and just remember, as part of our agreement with the TSPA or with the ISPA, every single one of your employees has to be a W-2. So you cannot have a office worker who's a 1099 contractor. So if you have a payroll specialist who works part-time for you, make sure she's a W-2 part-time employee.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a series of little things like that that people can miss. So if you're trying to do a self audit and you're just having any questions about stuff we haven't talked about, or even things that we have, feel free to reach out to us at Route
And,
Consult.
I mean, and this brings up a good point. I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about, because it happens infrequently for Linehaul, at our session in March when we're down in Houston doing our mini roadshow, and then probably again when we actually do the expo in July, we're going to talk about what is an audit, a compliance audit with FedEx like, because it happens very infrequently for Linehaul. It's much more common on the ISP side. I would say that there's probably 5-to-1 audits on the ISP to line haul side. Josh, what do you think?
I would agree, if not higher. There's just significantly more ISP audits. I rarely see TSP, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be prepared for it.
Yeah. So we're going to cover those topics, and then maybe, give it, depending on, what the feedback is from our event in Houston, we might do an hour-long webinar on the same topic and then talk about it at the expo as well. Because it's a very stressful event, but it doesn't have to be if you're prepared. You just have to have the material and then you just present it to FedEx, and in general, it's no big deal. Like if you have your material, you have your documents, if you follow your procedures, then you should be good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about peak points. This is kind of like one of my favorite times of the year because it's kind of like Christmas. You just got all these well, it is actually, I guess, kind of in conjunction with Christmas.
It's
You've
like
just run all these miles.
spend your present, right?
Yeah, you ran all these miles, you did a good thing. FedEx is like going to give you an attaboy and say, hey, here's 1,000 points. So, if you remember, we all get our baseline miles back in sometime usually right around when the TSPA comes out. We get told that, hey, your average miles for the year was 100,000 miles per week, and these are your thresholds to hit during peak to receive peak points, and they're set at 10%, 15%, 20%, 30%. I don't know of anybody that's over 30%, but it's up there, okay? And you get 10, you get 10 points per truck if you go over 10 points. You get 15 points per truck if you go over 15%, and so on and so forth. And it's based off of the number of tractors on your A1, not on your Schedule B, on your A1. So if you're running a ton of wild routes and you have two tractors on your Schedule A1, then you're only going to get, you know, X times two number of points per week. So that's something to keep in mind when you're structuring your business. So anyways, so beginning February, so we've been seeing these points. They've been sitting on your run assignment point statement. So if you scroll all the way down to your run assignment point statement, you'll see your points there. As of February 17th, you can allocate those points. Now, there are a lot of different strategies. Remember, the points is one of the currencies that you get to use when you're bidding on growth opportunities. Okay. These are organic opportunities to grow within the FedEx network. Typically, how it works is that you take an unassigned run and you convert it into a dedicated run. Now, you can take your points and put it onto an already dedicated run. And then if you want, you can then submit that dedicated run to try to buy or to try to bid on a better growth run. I mean, that is a strategy. But so let's go back. So you have all these points. Okay, the points can go anywhere. So if you are like me and you run out of 381, 389, and 406, which is Memphis, Olive Branch, and Northern Kentucky, I can take all the points I made over peak and say that I made 1,000 points, and I can allocate those points across any truck I want to. Now, if I don't allocate them between February 17th and March 16th, FedEx will automatically distribute them across all my trucks. So they'll take my 1,000 points and just give, a little bit to each one of my trucks. So if I have 20 trucks, they'll give 50 points to each truck, which is kind of a waste. So don't do that. Now, where am I going to put my points? So for me, I typically will look at the business I'm in, where the locations are, where are the growth runs, where are the growth opportunities. So how am I going to find out the growth opportunities? I'm talking to my line haul managers. So I'm going in, I'm having a call with the senior line haul manager in Olive Branch, in Memphis, and in Noki. I'm talking to dispatch. I'm talking to the planners. I'm talking to other contractors and saying, okay, hey, what temp run are you running? I'm running the horse cave. What do you got? And he'll be like, well, I'm running the Okraville. How long have you been running that one for? Well, I've been doing it for like a year, man. It's been awesome. And now that gets me thinking, well, maybe they're going to convert that temp run into a dedicated run. So it's your opportunity now to be the kind of like a sleuth, an investigator figuring out, okay, where are the growth runs going to come? Because what you want to do is you want to take those points and you want to put them on the truck that you want to convert. So you can either convert unassigned runs or you can convert dedicated runs. Now, why would you convert a dedicated run? So for example, I happen to have a very short dedicated run. It used to be this primo awesome dedicated run that did 580 miles a day. FedEx came in and said, you know what? We don't need you to run all the way out there anymore. We're going to cut it in half. So instead of doing 580 miles a day, now I do 290 miles a day. Let me tell you, I am not happy about my 290-mile run. It sucks. So, guess what I'm going to do with my points? I'm going to put some of my 1,000 points on that truck to try to make sure that it's one of the higher point trucks in my terminal so that when a growth opportunity comes, I'm going to use that dedicated run and I'm going to bid on a growth opportunity and then hopefully convert that 290-mile run into, say, a 500-mile per day run. And you know what that means? That I just created 210 miles per day. I'm going to do my math. Yeah, 210 miles per day of equity in my business. And that's a big deal because I just added 50,000 miles a week or 50,000 miles a year to my business. That's $100,000 a year or plus in revenue. And that's pure equity I've just created in my business. Now, if you take an unassigned run, Josh, is the going rate for an unassigned run the same as it is for a dedicated run?
No, yeah, I mean, there can be variance, but I would say in almost every case, a dedicated run is always going to trade at a higher rate than an unassigned.
Okay, so if I take this unassigned run and I stick another 500 points on that, and then I convert that unassigned run into a dedicated run, what have I just created?
A lot of value.
A lot of equity. A lot of equity. So that's the thought process here. Okay. So your goal in the next couple of weeks is to have conversations with dispatch, with planners, with the senior manager, with the station, with other contractors in the building, trying to figure out where the growth opportunity is going to come. Now, FedEx might be nice enough to say, hey, Josh, I got like 3 or 4 runs that we're going to post. It's going to be like a couple of these, a couple of those. Or they're going to say, you know what? I don't know. We're still evaluating. Well, if they're in that situation where they're playing with their cards close to their chest, that's where you get to do some investigating, trying to figure out the best opportunity and where you want to do. So what I've done, for example, over the last couple of years, I have 2 unassigned team runs. Let me tell you, trying to staff unassigned team runs is trying to steal like the nuclear codes, from the Chinese, you know, it's just it's challenging. There's nothing harder than staffing unassigned team runs. So I've been sticking all my points in those unassigned team runs. Now, last year they didn't provide any growth opportunities, and the year before that I missed out on a growth opportunity by just like this much. I was the second on 2 growth opportunities. So I've been storing all my points. Now I have 2 team runs, unassigned team runs that I have a lot of points on, and I'm just waiting for the opportunity because I'm tier 4 safety. So the metrics that they utilize to award growth runs is 40% is your points, 20% is your safety tier, um, and then 20% is going to be your service and availability, and then 20% is your vendor compliance. Okay. I think that's what it is. It's something along those lines. Did I give you
Yeah, that was 100. Yeah.
that was, I think that's what it is. We can do another webinar session where we can actually review that, but that's my understanding of what the changes in the TSPA were when they got rid of the FCAM compliance.
Hmm. Yeah.
In essence, the 2 things that are the biggest driver, because there's usually not a lot of difference between contractors and service and availability and better, is going to be your safety tier and your points.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, points are really important, but if you are tier 2 safety, tier 1 safety, you're not getting any new runs. Or it's
No.
very unlikely unless everyone else at the terminal is too.
Yeah. So,
Now, a couple of quick questions that I have there. If you, so it, can you clarify for people? Let's say you have a team run. Can you
Mhm.
bid on a solo? Or if you have a solo, can you bid on a team?
So the glorious situation is you can bid on anything. So if you have a night, so in some hubs, you might have an AM rotation, a PM rotation, and a team rotation. And then in some stations, you might just have one rotation. I don't know how they do it. Like maybe they only know that they're ever going to have solo runs, and so you don't have to worry about teams. But in the hubs, like I can put a bunch of points onto my PM URR or my PM unassigned, and then I could bid on a team run or I could bid on an AM run. So it doesn't really matter. The the trucks are fungible when it comes to bidding.
Okay. Another clarifying point. You're in 3 different terminals. During the normal course of the year, can you bid with your Memphis points in Kentucky?
No, good question, Josh. No, so while this period of time you can allocate your points across any truck that you want, come March 17th, the only trucks I can bid on you have to be domiciled in the hub area. So, and this is where it gets a little confusing. So the hub area is a definition where the stations are belonging to a hub. So if you're in a station, they'll say, okay, you only can bid on these runs if you're in the station. Now, if all the contractors in that station happen to be tier 1 or tier 2 safety, typically in that situation, FedEx will expand the growth opportunity to anybody in the hub area because historically, if you're tier one or tier two safety, you're not eligible to bid on growth runs. It's part of the opportunity to cure functionality of the TSPA and just means that you need to improve your safety score. But in that situation, what they'll do is they'll open up a run in Kalamazoo Station for the Toledo. So Kalamazoo, I assume, falls into the Toledo hub area. It would make sense since there is no hub in Michigan. Um, I would expect that's where it would be. So if there is no contractor in Kalamazoo, Michigan that has a safety score above tier two, then they would say, okay, we're posting this growth opportunity within the Toledo hub area. And then anybody that has a tractor domiciled in Toledo would be eligible to bid on those runs.
Yeah. And so it's a big deal. I think it's just worth, double emphasizing the fact that if you operate out of multiple terminals, this peak point allocation is a way to get a big leg up at another terminal if you decide to dump everything into one zone, if you find out that there's a lot of growth coming.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it done. I mean, I imagine that a lot of the contractors who are based in Savannah will be dumping, because most of those guys there are very few contractors, I think, who are just in Savannah by itself. Most of them are probably in Savannah and other terminals. And so they're taking their points from those other, wherever they generated them and trying to dump everything into Savannah because Savannah is growing like hotcakes right now. And so, I mean, that's where a lot of I imagine that there's going to be a lot of opportunities to convert dedicated runs into, or unassigned runs to dedicated runs. Um, Houston's growing pretty fast. Olive Branch is growing pretty fast. So, and then, the other nice thing is that you're going to start seeing a lot of solo runs being posted from the conversion of Federal Express into well, the merger between Federal Express Corporation and Ground. So what you're going to see is a lot of the express courier trucking routes are going to go away and they're going to be given to TSPs.
Okay. And so you expect those to be mainly solos? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I expect them mostly to be solos. I don't know if Federal Express. I think Freight. I don't even think Freight has any teams. So I don't. I think the only operation for teams is in the FedEx Ground network. And if you think about how Express is organized, anything that historically needed to move, that could be moved by team, well, Federal Express will move it by air. And so that's where a lot of the synergies and savings are going to come, is that, if it needs to go from Memphis to say DC, well, you could fly it there or you could drive it there and the packet can still arrive the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good call out in general. A lot of the changes and things that we're seeing around Express is mainly we're thinking about it in the P&D side, but there are very real indications that there will be growth that comes from Express in the Linehaul and TSP network as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next 2 or 3 years are going to be um, a fair amount of growth on the solo side, especially as you get the merger of the station network into the hubs. So FedEx Ground operates with a hub and spoke model. Federal Express or FedEx Express operated similar, but with the airport model. And so those ramps, we call ourselves hubs. They call the airports ramps. And those ramp opportunities are going to come where um, the freight will get offloaded off of the air carrier and then put onto trailers that then get distributed into the network. And it's going to be people like, it'll be TSPs doing those movements from the ramps to the hubs to get distributed back into the network.
So, yeah. And so as that continues to happen, we'll continue to let you all know. But for now, Alex, I think that was kind of what we wanted to cover around both the audits and the peak
Yeah.
points. Now I'm going to go through our new listings and new upcoming events. So if anyone has any questions, this is your chance to type them in to the Q&A box while I'm going through these. So several new listings this week. The first one's a Linehaul listing out of Pennsylvania. It is 4 Linehaul runs at 1.5 million. This is 2 dedicated and solos and 2 unassigned solos, and 7 trucks. So it's got a bunch of additional trucks and some spot runs as well that are a part of this business. The next few are out of our P&D businesses. First is out of South Carolina. It's 15 routes at 1.125 million. in upstate South Carolina. This is 22 employees, one manager, and a spare truck as well for this business. Next one's out of New Hampshire. It's 10 P&D routes at 400,000. 11 employees, 11 trucks, and a manager. It's a low mileage operation and a pretty low entry point in FedEx right now if you're looking for New Hampshire. Georgia, we've got 10 routes at $600,000, 11 employees, 12 trucks, and a manager. Another low mileage operation. And then the last P&D we have is out of Pennsylvania. It's 9 routes, $650,000, 12 employees, 13 trucks, and a manager. So on the P&D side, we have Pennsylvania, Georgia, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. And on the line haul side, we have one in Pennsylvania. And then we've got a slew of bread listings that have come live this week. We have 11 of them. So I'm not going to read through all the stats on all of them, but we have routes in Texas, Tennessee, Ohio, Vermont, Missouri, Kentucky, Ohio, and another Kentucky. So any of those, if you're looking into the bread route space, we've got different sizes, one routes, bigger operations all across the country. So you can go to our site. We put it in the chat for all kinds of different listings of different sizes, as well as the P&D and line haul that I mentioned. A couple of upcoming events to make sure you know about. One, if you're on the West Coast, in the California area, we've got a happy hour in San Jose in about 2 weeks on the 25th. And it is a free happy hour, completely free to attend, networking, food, drinks, but we'll also have Tim Goff there from My Ground Force to kind of talk through some optimization and some things to understand in the line haul industry. So again, free to attend. It's at 5 p.m. on February 25th. And then the other one that Alex alluded to as well is we have a Houston Roadshow specifically focused on line haul on March 27th and 28th. The 27th is for new investors. We'll have that day, but if you are a new investor trying to learn, stay. And the next day is the road show on the 28th, where it's really designed to go over a bunch of the different things that we're seeing in the space, have discussions, have vendors. Again, completely free to attend. Hopefully we will see you all there. Both Alex and I will for sure be there. So let's get
And Tim Goff, don't forget, Tim Goff is going to be there.
we'll be there too. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at the Q&A. So we've got one here from Matt. So he doesn't know if he's P&D or line haul, but in general, as he's thinking about the P&D merger, how should you feel? How are you currently feeling? What are you hearing about, how contractors are commenting and feeling about this merger of Express?
So, I mean, like I said, for the line haul side, it's been beneficial. I mean, I've picked up additional work because of the Express integration. I'm seeing opportunities where, like what I just mentioned, where freight comes off of a ramp or off of an air carrier, and then I move it to another location because it doesn't need to be there. It might have arrived at Saturday, and it doesn't need to be in the next location until Sunday. And so, instead of flying it there for the 2 to 3 hours and spending lots of money on JP8 jet fuel, they can just use me and my truck to get it to the same location. I will say that my sense is that there's probably I think there's like, what is it, like 800 to 1,000 stations and terminals in the ground network, and then about 600 in there's 600 stations in the express, let alone the number of ramps. We're going to ignore the ramps. My impression is that in this integration, they're going to merge all these express stations into the ground network. There might be some ground contractors that will move into an express building because the express building might be newer. But in general, on the line haul side, I mean, I haven't heard of anybody losing a run. If anything, it's all been just growth opportunities. I mean, it's really early days for line haul on the express on the integration side. One of the things I've been doing is trying to get all my drivers to get their TSA security clearance so they can go into the airports, as well as get hazmat endorsements. Just so you know, hazmat is just not like an easy test. It is a challenging test for these truck drivers to get. So I've been incentivizing my guys. I pay for all the study material. I pay for the testing. The testing is $100 usually to take the test, and then it's $95 to go through and get your background check done. But then once you have it, you get both your hazmat certification and you'll get your TSA certification as well. So I've been encouraging, and if they complete the whole process, I give them a bonus for completing the process, and then they get a bonus for the annual renewal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
so
I would agree. Largely line haul, we're not expecting a much change or disruption. If anything, it should largely be growth and then keeping up with things like the trainings you'll have to do. But Matt, I will say we are seeing more on the P&D side. So if you're going into P&D, just general notes, we do see, there are some people that are having changes in CSAs, whether it's bigger or smaller, depending on how FedEx is working in that specific area. In general, FedEx is trying to give some transparency to those who are going through the changes and let them know what their new contract will look like, what the new revenue will look like, and any changes in territory size if they're shrinking, give them some kind of payment and transition bonus. What I'll say though is we're still taking this as a case by case because FedEx is still in a lot of ways each wave of the express rollout trying to refine what they're doing and improve the rollout in those specific chunks. So if you're going through this, if you're buying one of these businesses, I would highly encourage you to talk to your broker or your consultant if you're working through us. We are working actively to make sure that buyers, have the right protections, the right knowledge as you're building it into the contract. Again, it's going to be a little bit of a case by case, but we've seen many of these already, as you can imagine, and we're actively working through those.
no, I haven't. I mean, maybe you've heard differently. I mean, you hear these horror stories about contractors losing CSAs, but I've actually never talked to somebody personally who's done that. They've all the stories I've heard is, well, I heard about Joe Schmo, and Joe Schmo's cousin and his next door neighbor's sister's uncle
Yeah.
lost their CSA. And you can never get to the actual person. Now, what you do see is that you might have an express integration go through, and you might have a contractor who's tier one safety. Well, in general, if you're tier one safety, you're probably bronze and you're probably not getting renewed in that situation anyways. And so while they might want to blame the FedEx 2.0 integration, realistically, there was a lot of underlying factors of why that CSA wasn't being renewed in the first place.
Yeah, I am seeing the express changes be a catalyst that speeds up conversations that were already on that track. So people who are bronze and lower safety, they might have thought they had more time to correct the issue, but the express rollout might happen sooner than their contract end, and so it's kind of instigating those conversations of FedEx basically having to decide if they want to roll out a new territory to somebody who's got really low safety or really low metal. So I would agree with you. There may be people who are losing their contracts, but for the most part, from what I've seen, it's been some of the hearsay without, a lot of facts. We'll see. I'm not going to discount that that's happening, but I would say most of the situations when I actually dig into them are people who are on track to lose the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people want to make it sound like FedEx is a bad big brother, but it's not the case. I mean, FedEx will, I mean, if as long as you do what FedEx is asking you to do, which is provide service, provide availability, and be safe, FedEx is actually a really good partner.
And I would say largely, the reasons for this express changes in CSAs is they're trying to make denser territories that are easier to operate because Express does add some logistical complexity on the P&D side, and they're expecting growth in volume to come. So they're trying to make, denser, more easily managed territories to prepare for the volume that's coming from a few different places. But yeah, you're right. It's not in FedEx's best interest to vacate a bunch of territories. It's really expensive for them to do that. And so it's really them trying to make decisions as a corporation if they want to continue to partner with a contractor if they see them as a high risk when they're
No,
making.
I mean, now one thing that, I think I'm interested in listening to FedEx's earning call, which is going to be next month,
Yeah.
is about the impact of the de minimis packaging size. Okay. So this gets into a really technical trade package rule, but there are some ways around customs and tariffs for Chinese manufacturers and shippers to ship small packages. Like we're talking about, I think less than 5 pounds, and it has to be less than like, I think a cubic foot, right, in volume size. So these are considered de minimis packages, and this is an area that FedEx had been looking to with Shen and Timu, Shane and Timu, whatever they're called. these Chinese like Amazon copycats. So I'm really curious to see what FedEx happens to say. I'm sure that somebody is going to ask a question on the call about the impact of this de minimis executive order from President Trump. So that's something to keep an eye on. It hasn't had an impact in my mileage. If anything, I mean, just to give you, I mean, Josh and I were just talking about it. So going into peak, um, let's put it this way. I'm running almost my same peak volumes right now, and it's a month and a half after peak, and I've never
Yeah,
run
it's
peak
crazy.
volumes after.
Mid-February is like dead period. So that's crazy. Yeah.
So I'm still running peak volumes a month and a half after peak. I did see a little bit of a slowdown like around MLK, but more of that was due to the weather and weather disruptions. Those are the things that are causing me to have like dips in miles. But realistically, I'm running just about the same mileage I was running during peak. So it's kind of crazy. So, knock on wood, this
Yeah.
keeps on going. But so on my side, it hasn't, the tariffs and the threat of tariffs haven't had an impact. I'm monitoring and I'm watching the newscasts on a regular basis. But right now it's been, everything's been good to go so far.
Yeah. So next question here is from Eugene. So I think what his question is that do you physically have to be at a location in Linehaul, or can you still run it remotely? And let's say you don't have a manager. If you don't have somebody who's on the ground, you've just got drivers, you still have to physically be there.
So, no, you don't. You can have a lead driver. So there are a lot of different ways to skin the cat. You do not have to have a CDL. You do not have to be you don't have to be there. I mean, realistically, line haul truck drivers don't want to see you. Okay, I'm going to get this. So get this. I mean, they want to know that you care about them. They want to know that you're going to be on the phone for them. So when they call you at 2 a.m. in the morning, complaining about the fact that their, ex-wife is asking for more alimony, you're going to be there to listen. But they don't want to necessarily see you. Now, that being said, you need to figure out how to get your truck maintained. That's the biggest thing. So you don't need to be there. Your driver is going to come into the office. He's going to get into his truck. He's going to drive into the FedEx yard. He's going to check in on MTA. He's going to get his load and he's going to leave. Dispatch is going to call you. They don't want to actually see you in the office. They're going to call you on your phone or call your manager on your phone and talk to you about runs and stuff like that. But there's no reason for you to be there. But the one thing you do need to figure out is how am I going to do a road test on my driver? There are ways to figure that out. And then if you're bringing in a new candidate, so you have to road test all new candidates. And then you need to figure out at a minimum, how are you going to maintain those trucks? So how are you going to get a mechanic to take a look at the vehicle? And if it needs more work than somebody can do on site, how do you move that vehicle from there to the maintenance a maintenance facility? Otherwise, you technically don't need to be there. I like to have my people managers on site because they spot check to make sure that my pre-trip and post-trip inspections are getting done. They're doing in-person training when we catch or ID faults on the Vetter devices. So if like I have a driver who's not wearing a seatbelt, my manager is going to say, "Hey, look at this tablet. This shows you not wearing your seatbelt. What is the rule? Wear a seatbelt. This is a safety violation. You're losing your safety bonus for this month." Whatever. So, but yeah, you don't need to be there. I mean, as opposed to P&D, there is no requirement. I mean, my senior managers see me, they hear from me. I mean, we text, we phone, and we talk on the phone, but they see me 2 to 4 times a year. That's it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important clarification to say you can be remote, you just can't be absentee. That's never language you should internalize or use because it's still your business. You need to be thinking about it, available, taking calls for it as needed. You just don't always physically have to be there. Now, I'll say, we give all of these businesses, like this businesses can be run this way. Yes, plenty of people do it with the caveat that there are some terminal managers that'll come in and say, especially for a new person, hey, you have to be here. And even though there's no rule, there's no black and white rule or anything saying that, you have to be there to be successful. Some terminal managers can make that decision. They could say, I'm not going to approve you if you can't be here every week. It's not a necessary thing, but some terminal managers, they are kind of the princes of their little kingdoms. And if they decide to enforce that rule, they may not approve you as a new owner, or you may basically have to earn some credibility before you can be more remote.
I mean, I would say the one time where you're going to want to be more on site, and this is just to protect your business as it is. Like if you go from tier 4 to tier 3, you're going to be okay. But if you go tier 3 to tier 2, you need to get your butt to your yard and figure out what's going on, and then have face-to-face conversations with every one of your drivers. You want to make sure that they're doing their pre-trip inspections, that they're wearing their safety belts, that they're driving with a seatbelt on, that they have a place, a cup holder for their cellular device because they cannot have that in their hands. Um, so you need to take all those precautions in that situation. So in those instances, that's where you do need to be on site. But if you have a strong operation and you're doing your safety training and you're developing a good culture, no. I mean, I talk to my managers on a daily basis. I probably get 2 to 3 phone calls a day from my drivers. I happen to have 47 of them, so it's in the grand scheme of thing, I'm talking to 7 to 10% of my drivers on a daily basis. And there's drivers who, you know, I mean, I have drivers who've never met me. I mean, it's a shame, but they happen to I'm in when I go to visit, they might be gone. They might be out on the road. But I take care of them. I mean, I just bought all my drivers T-bone steaks. I mean, let me tell you, the number of pictures and compliments I got from the T-bone steaks were great. I mean, my drivers are good cooks. Even in the middle of winter, they'll go out and grill a T-bone
That's
steak.
awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So, Alex, thank you for being here, providing that knowledge and giving us all those updates. And everyone, thanks for joining. And we will see you all in the next one. Thanks.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.